May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be freed from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable and free of economic hardship and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. Today we have a guest, another person whose path crossed Shunryu Suzuki's, Judyth Weaver. Judyth is you can check her out at her website, JudythWeaver.com. That's JUDYTH, JudythWeaver.com. Sensory awareness, Tai Chi Chuan, pre and perinatal somatic process and body, mind, spirit workshops. And she was a dancer and was very early in Japan studying traditional classical Japanese dance, and then Zen with Mumon Yamada and Kobe. And you'll see she has quite a story to tell. So, after the pause to meditate, we will get right into talking to Judyth. So, when you hear the bell, hit pause, if you wish, and meditate or whatever for as long as you wish. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause. And we will be here to hit the bell and get going with this phone chat with Judyth Weaver.
Hello?
Hi, Judyth. David.
Hi, David. Did you get it worked out?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, we still don't have Wi-Fi, but I called up Mac DeWatta, and he said, yeah, we're here. So I called my driver, and he didn't answer. So our housekeeper took me over on her motor scooter, and he did something to put hotspot on my iPhone, my new iPhone, that it wasn't visible. And then I came back and had lunch, and now we are speaking thanks to my iPhone. Neat. So, very good. So, Judyth, what are you up to these days?
What am I up to these days?
Yeah.
I'm here in Seattle, Washington, and have been here since I came back from Mexico from teaching Tai Chi on March 24th with the intention to go up to Canada, where I had many workshops planned. And, of course, the border was closed on March 21st. So I'm stuck here in Seattle, and which I've never liked.
Oh.
But since I happen to be here and have been here for almost 10 months now, and will be here for longer because I don't see the border opening soon. So I've raised a flock of little chicks that have now just started laying eggs, and I'm clearing some of the many decade-old, huge, tough blackberry roots that have been defacing the property that I'm living on.
Well, where's your home?
Where's my home?
Yeah.
Well, I have two of them. I'm here in Seattle because I seem to need a home in the U.S., although not any longer if I ever get out of here. And my home is also in Canada. My intention was to spend 6 months in Canada because that's all I'm allowed to as a U.S. citizen. And then I would spend several months in Mexico teaching, like I have been for many, many years. And 3 months in Mexico and 3 months in Brazil, where I've been going the last few years.
Wow.
But that doesn't seem to be happening. And of course, I went to Japan every year for at least once or twice since 1985.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah.
So, what are you teaching?
Well, it depends where. In Mexico, I teach Tai Chi. In Japan, I teach sensory awareness. In Canada, I teach both sensory awareness, Tai Chi, and also do what would you call it? Well, early working with adults process workshops. So I'm a somatic psychotherapist.
What workshops? What do you call it? What workshops?
Well, I call them somatic process workshops.
Oh,
which are helping. I work with big people and little people really, for often working on their early traumas, early birth traumas, during birth, before birth, after birth, and teaching adults how to be better humans with babies and with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's various. Do you remember Charlotte Selver?
Oh, very well. Very
well. I started working with her in 1968. So, and until she died at age 102.
Right. I saw her when she was 101 or 100, and did a great interview with her. She was really quite alert.
Yeah. Yes, she was, to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She called up Richard Baker. She got married at 101. And, right?
Well, I think it was a bit younger than that.
Well, she got married again soon before she died.
Yeah, that was to keep because Peter was Canadian, so he could come back and forth.
Oh, so it was earlier than 100, but it was very old. So she called up Dick Baker and said, "Hey, Dick, I just got married again."
Well, there you go. It wasn't a big ceremony, believe me. We celebrated her birthdays mainly.
Oh, well, that's really wonderful. Yeah, I love Charlotte and Charles.
Yeah. She taught. Have you were up in her house up in Muir Beach? Yeah. Well, she taught from her deathbed, from her bed in the living room. She taught her last class the evening before she died.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, she taught all the way.
Wow. Wow, she was something. Yeah. I first met her in, I guess, 1967. She helped us raise money for Tassajara.
Yeah.
Maybe met her in 1966. So you studied with her. Well, who else? Or what else?
My main teachers or teachings, you might say, is sensory awareness, the work of Elsa Gindler through Charlotte Selver, and I started studying with her in 1968. And then Wilhelm Reich, do you know who he is?
Oh, yeah.
Was. Yeah. So his daughter was a great friend and mentor of mine.
Oh, goodness. What's her name?
Eva Reich.
Uh-huh. And where was she located?
She in Maine.
Uh-huh. Wow.
In Maine. And then there's Tai Chi, the great Grandmaster Chen Manqing. But the funniest thing, David, is when I first met Eva Reich, it was 1984 or 5, and by that time I had been trained in Reichian therapy in the 70s, and just because the work of sensory awareness makes so much sense and is so natural that a lot of my clients were Zen Center students. The work of sensory awareness, you might say, sort of melded in with the work of Reichian therapy that I had been taught. And when I met Eva Reich, she needed a ride to the airport. She was going to Japan to teach. And so I gave her a ride to the airport, and we got stuck in traffic on the way to the SF airport. And we're talking about a gazillion things, and finally she says, "Okay, my dear, so what is it that you do?" And I thought, uh-oh, I am really in trouble now, because number one, I knew that Reich never wanted the work to be named after him. He called his work vegetotherapy or ergonomic, therapy. Mm-hmm. There was another word too that isn't coming right now. But in the West, we called it Reichian therapy, and I knew that I had combined or integrated sensory awareness. So I went, uh-oh, to myself, I'm really in trouble. And I said, well, I know he wouldn't have liked it, but here in the West, we call the work Reichian therapy, and I'm trained in it, and in fact I have my doctorate in it, but I have also integrated the work of Charlotte Selver and Elsa Gindler. And then I said that, and I sort of gritted my teeth thinking that she was really going to be angry, and she said, "Oh, my father would be so glad." And the truth is that, I know very, very clearly now that Wilhelm Reich's work and his breakaway from just plain old, lie on the couch and free associate psychotherapy, he was influenced by his second wife, well, his first wife too, who had both studied with Elsa Gindler, Charlotte Selver's teacher.
Oh.
So that's how it was, because of the Gindler connection and the Gindler work, that Reichian therapy became Reichian therapy.
Oh.
So for me it was a great, connection, and we became great friends. And when she was little, she said she went to school, to a Gindler school, and she loved it because she was allowed to crawl underneath the tables and over the chairs and everything, free movement, free space. So, and I've given many lectures and talked a lot about the connection. Charlotte Selver influenced so many people in the U.S. All sorts of people of all various different kinds of therapies and practice. And then Gindler also did, without thinking of it or knowing to. Charlotte went to Essel, and she knew she was influencing a lot of these people. Gindler just did her stuff in Berlin, and in the summer they went to the sea or something. But interesting, both of these women, neither of them, they were not psychologists. They had both been trained in movement, and both decided, well, it was Gindler who decided she didn't want to teach people how to move anymore. She wanted to help them find their own movements.
Well, what sort of movement was she trained in?
Well, they were both trained in, it was called gymnastics, beautiful gymnastics, which really means beautiful movement. So it was from a Heidi, what was her name? Kleimester. I could look up I'm not good with names anymore, but they were taught how to, sort of like a dance class. And Gindler, after she healed herself, she knew that she didn't want to teach other people how to move. She wanted to help them find their own sensing, their own way, and that's how it all happened. And Charlotte was also trained in this beautiful gymnastics movement, and also left it because of the influence of Gindler.
Oh, was Gindler older?
Gindler was older, yes. She was.
Did you meet Gindler?
No, I didn't. I've been to Gindler, the museum, in Berlin, and one of my dear friends and colleagues is a Gindler person. In fact, we were just speaking, she's in Germany, about doing a workshop together, but the times are just, the time for Europe and the time for here, it would be hard to coordinate. But so Gindler died in 1961.
Oh.
Yeah, and I hadn't met Charlotte, although years before then, in New York, I was an aspiring dancer in New York, and I saw at the New School for Social Research, there was a course called Nonverbal Communication, and I thought, oh, that's for me. I want to take that. And it was being taught by Charlotte Selver and Charles Brooks, who I had never heard of. But I did not take it because it interfered with some of my dance classes. So I never did take that course. But when I came back from Japan in 1968 and living on Bush Street in those, houses that we rented across from the synagogue, somebody said, "Hey, we're going down to the Unitarian Church. There's a workshop there tonight by Charlotte Selver. You want to go?" And we all walked down. A whole bunch of us from Zen Center walked down. John Steiner, whole bunches of people. Gordon, what was it? Bennett? Yeah, a whole bunch of people. And it was Hedwig Kallmeyer, who was the teacher of Gindler and of Selver also, yes. But for instance, in this, there's a huge book that was first published in German maybe 10 years ago now, and has been maybe 4 or 5 years ago translated into English and published, and it's huge. The title is The Handbook of Body Psychotherapy and Somatic Psychology, and Chapter 1 is the father of somatic therapy, Wilhelm Reich. And the next chapter, I think I'm chapter number 4, I was asked to write the mother of somatic psychotherapy, Elsa Gindler. So she's well known through this work, even though she didn't know about this work. Wow! And I have several articles about her and her influence on Reich and body psychotherapy.
Now, maybe a lot of this material is available through your website?
It is. Some of the writings about this, yes.
And what's your website?
Yes. JudythWeaver.com.
That's easy. I'll remember that. And
right.
I'll put it in the metadata and in the introduction. Good. And on your, it's probably already, I have a page for you on kook.com, but I'll beef it up too.
Yeah, I just noticed it. I went onto your website last night, and I thought, whoa, had David interviewed me before? I guess you have.
Yeah, I guess so. A long time ago. I didn't look at it. I just knew something was there. I thought I'd look at it afterwards.
Yeah, I was surprised. I read it. I thought, well, how interesting. Yeah, it was quite some time ago.
Yeah.
It was quite some time ago, yeah.
Yeah, I just did a podcast with Tim Ford, and I'd interviewed him 26 years before.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Uh, um, so, well, now where were you born?
I was born in Detroit, Michigan.
No kidding. And where'd you grow
Yeah.
up?
Well, I was in Detroit, Michigan for 3.5 years, and my mother died giving birth to my sister when I was 3.5. So
Oh,
my father moved us to Rochester, New York,
hmm.
which wasn't very different and wasn't very much better. He had a brother there. And then when I was 10, we moved down to Miami, Florida, which is, you might say, where I grew up, as if anybody could grow up in Miami, Florida in the 40s
Wow, far out.
and the 50s, yeah.
What was that like?
It was weird. We were very, very poor, so I lived a half block away from Colored Town.
Oh,
So that was interesting. And I mean, going down on the train and looking out the window at one of the train stops and seeing two water fountains, one for white and one for colored, and I thought, "Uh-oh, what is this?"
yeah, we had that in
And
Fort Worth when I was very young. That went out though. That went out in Texas, where I come from, Fort Worth, uh, way before civil rights laws in '64. But I remember when I was a little kid in downtown, separate bathrooms, separate water fountains.
yeah,
Yeah.
still,
What you said?
yeah,
Still?
yeah,
Where?
uh-huh.
Where?
In the South, in different places.
Hmm. No, I'll look into that. Uh,
Yeah, you look into that and you let me know.
well, the
Yeah.
South is, in many ways, has changed more than other parts of the country. Uh,
Yes, that's true. Do you know you remember the movie? What was it? I think it got an Oscar. Moonlight or something about um,
yeah, yeah, I know what you're
uh,
talking about.
drugs and things. Well, that where that movie was shot, that was the neighborhood I grew up in.
No kidding. Oh yeah,
Yeah. Uh huh.
yeah.
I
Wow.
went to Robert E. Lee Junior High School.
Oh wow, wow. Fort Worth, Fort Worth was called Where the West Begins, and it identified more with the Southwest than the South. Uh,
Hmm.
so the Civil War and everything was not a big deal. It was to some people, but not like I spent time in Louisiana and Mississippi and other places, and that was quite different. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
uh,
Well, I
definitely.
didn't have well, I didn't feel good about the segregation and everything, but my problem more growing up is that uh we're Jewish, and I was stoned for being Jewish. And people would say, "You killed Jesus, you killed Jesus," and I would say, "No, I didn't. The Romans did." And I would turn around and run as fast as I could, which was not very fast. And I would get caught and tied to trees and have arrows shot at me. So there
Really,
was a lot of, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
there was. I never heard. I only heard anything anti-Semitic one time in Fort Worth growing up, but I heard a lot about it from people elsewhere as I left. I didn't even know
Yeah.
what it was, and uh, I had a lot of very close Jewish friends. Some of my best friends. Now, some of my best children are Jewish, but back then, some of my best friends were Jewish.
Hmm.
Kelly, because Daya is his
Uh-huh.
mother. Um,
Uh,
but I had no idea about because all my Jewish friends were rich and doing well and
yeah.
had big Christmas trees, and uh, I had no idea about all that until Exodus came out, and I read that and saw the
Uh,
movie,
yeah.
and
Uh,
then I get involved with civil rights and stuff, and so I left, and
mhm.
then
Yeah.
I'd learned about that. Well, so look, um,
So all your friends were rich. We were poor being a poor Jew in Miami is really sucked.
Yeah, yeah, I did. I thought all Jews everywhere were rich until I left Texas.
Uh-huh.
um, but that was just Fort Worth, Dallas, and just
Mhm.
the people I knew. Uh, and so, you get, especially kids get distorted views of the world. I mean, I grew up in playing tennis in
Wow.
a country club. And
Huh.
had a car when I
Oh,
was
really?
14.
Oh my gosh.
Uh,
Huh.
uh-huh. Uh, um, well, hey, what what one way to look at this to say when did you start developing a way-seeking mind? In other, what's your earliest memory of having some uh, inclination about spiritual stuff or whatever?
Well, I'll tell you, David, when I was 6 or 7, around that age, many, many times I
Mm-hmm.
would go, well, and anyway, this was, World War II. I remember movies or things about the dirty Japs, comments about that, not movies. I was too young to go to movies. And those um, flags that hung in the windows with stars for how many of your sons were killed in the war. It was wartime, but I would go to sleep holding my eyes back, hoping that they would slant by the time I woke up. I wanted to have long black hair. I wanted to have a different color skin. I wanted to have my eyes slant like that, and I wanted to grow up and marry the Dalai Lama. Nobody knew who the Dalai Lama was. I have no idea how I knew, except I do have an idea, but it wasn't through anything I learned in Rochester, New York.
Hey, that's cool. Well, it's still not too late. Uh,
What?
have you? It's still not too
Oh,
late to
well,
marry him.
we had a meeting. I told him. I told him that I had been in love with him since I was 6. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have a good relationship. No, I don't need to marry him, but that's what I wanted. So I was attracted to something else, away from. Oh, I was being raised by a really wicked stepmother, really nasty, wicked stepmother. So I would have gone
How
anywhere. Yeah.
classic.
But in Miami, Florida. So let's see. I was still in high school. I was well. I was looking. I would go to churches with my friends. I would read books on religion and philosophy. And my question was, why am I here? What am I supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
And every one of those religions gave me an answer, none of which I could take on because they just weren't mine. And while I was still in school, because I was reading, I found the Tao Te Ching. I was, as a senior in high school, or maybe a junior, we had to do a report on something, and I so much wanted to do it on Lao Tzu or Buddha, but somehow those were taken by the time the teacher came to me, and I had to do it on Muhammad, which was not my choice. But when I finally got...
Well, that's amazing. Somebody had taken
Yes.
Lao Tzu and Buddha. What school was that? Was that Robert E. Lee?
No, it was Miami Senior High School.
Well, that's amazing. What year did you
55 or
graduate?
56, I don't remember.
Well, nobody in my high school would have thought to do Buddha or Lao Tzu, and I graduated in '63. Although I did Emerson, I was interested in Emerson.
So that's, yeah, I had Thoreau and Emerson there too. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But yeah. But when I finally got, and I was still in high school, when I finally got to reading Lao Tzu and Buddha, my question, which was always, why am I here? And all the Christians and other religions were giving me answers that I couldn't accept. But basically Buddhism and Taoism too said, why are you here? we don't know why you're here, but since you're here, why don't you just do the best you can? And I thought, okay, I can handle that. I can do that. So I searched, and there was nothing down in Miami, Florida, except there was one man who had studied with Paramhansa Yogananda.
Uh-huh.
So there are 3 books that changed my life. One was the Tao Te Ching, which I carried with me all the way around the world when I traveled. The other one was Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramhansa Yogananda, and the other one was Somerset Maugham's The Razor's Edge, where the guy had been to Asia and he came back, and he basically was a taxi driver in New York. And I'll tell you, when I went to New York to live in 57 to become a dancer, every time I got into a taxi, I looked into the eyes of the guy to see if this was him. And of course, it never was.
The Razor's Edge, it sort of alluded to him meeting Ramana Maharshi, right?
Right, I think so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But I started studying lessons from the SAF, Self-Awareness Foundation, whatever Yogananda.
SRF, Self-Realization.
Self-Realization Fellowship, right, you got it.
Yeah, my family's, one of the closest families to us, Dolly, was in SRF back then, and I knew about SRF, and
when you were still in Texas?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I grew up around, into cosmic consciousness and, but more like what became the New Age.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah, but some Hinduism, psychic surgery, faith healing. But basically my father was, aiming at enlightenment, and through New Thought Christianity, though not.
So even in Miami, I remember going to seances, and when I went to New York, I turned out to be the youngest member of the, wasn't the Theosophic, it was the American Association for Psychic Research.
I knew about it.
They were all old people, and I was 17, 18 years old.
Wow.
I was 17 when I went to New York. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, those were the amazing days, especially.
Wow. And so, what were you doing when you left Miami? Where'd you go? Where'd you go to college?
I didn't go to college. Yeah, I wanted to, but I was offered a scholarship at the University of Miami, but my family basically wouldn't let me do it. My wicked stepmother, wouldn't, and I just wanted to get away. So I graduated. I was a year ahead of myself. I had skipped a grade.
Yeah.
So I was very young. I just turned 16, I think, when I graduated. I skipped a grade because I was put in nursery school because my mother had died and nobody knew what to do with me. So and I was supposed to stay in nursery school for 2 years.
Yeah.
But when they were all ready to go into kindergarten, I just went along with them. So I skipped a grade, but the grade I skipped was nursery school, which doesn't mean I'm very intelligent. But it's just I knew how to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
So I was 16 years old. I worked for a year as a secretary in Miami and saved up enough money and left for New York City to become a dancer.
There we go.
With another schoolmate friend, the two of us. We were aspiring dancers, and we went to New York, and oh my gosh, this was, 57, the year that West Side Story opened on Broadway.
57?
I think, yeah. It was exciting times. Exciting times. And there was also the American Buddhists, the American Buddhist Association on Riverside Drive, where I studied.
That's the American Buddhist Study Center, founded in 1951 at 331 Riverside Drive, 3rd floor, New York, New York.
And also the New School for Social Research, where I studied Taoism.
What's that Buddhist place? Tell me more about it. On Riverside Drive, huh?
It was in Riverside Drive, the American Buddhist Academy, I think. There was a priest there. On Sundays, you could see Japanese movies, but with the priest, he taught calligraphy and he taught Japanese. So I remember getting lost getting to it. I was signed up for a Japanese class, and the very first day, the very first class, I got lost, and I got into the class late, and I learned my first Japanese word, which was, you will appreciate this since you probably know it, shikata ga nai.
Yeah, sure. Can't be helped.
Yeah, right. Sorry I'm late, shikata ga nai. So that was my first and biggest Japanese word.
Far out. Hey, West Side Story, yes, 1957, September 26th.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because we were both, dancers, aspiring dancers. I have seen West Side Story, the whole play from the beginning to the end, on Broadway 3 times, and the last half 17 times. Do you understand how?
You were in it.
No, I wasn't in it. We, as young, poor, struggling, aspiring dancers, we would go to the theater at the time for intermission. And after the intermission break, we would go into the theater with the other paying customers, and you could either stand, or if there were empty seats, you could have a seat, and nobody bothered you because it was the second half.
Oh, that's very, very interesting. Very interesting. My mother and sister and I saw West Side Story on Broadway. God, I wonder what year. A few years later, probably. Maybe around 1960, 61. Far out. Yeah. We saw a lot. I saw a lot of shows there.
You'd go to New York from Texas?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did your father do, David?
Real estate.
Yeah.
And he built homes. But he died when I was 11. But,
oh, wow.
And mainly he was interested in understanding the nature of mind. That was his trip.
So.
And we never said God. It was always mind. Yeah. So I was very comfortable when I ran into Buddhism. It was sort of, oh yeah, this is stating it better. I liked it.
Yeah, right.
So all right. So what happened then? What happened in New York?
What happened in New York? I was a secretary to earn money to pay for my dance classes and rent and a little bit of food. I was really an aspiring, starving young artist. I was a model for some top artists like Moses Sawyer, who one of my dance teachers suggested that I was that kind of model. That the Moses Sawyer's wife had been a modern dancer with Martha Graham, and I had that kind of body. So he suggested I go model for him, which I did. Our legal secretary, artist model, dance classes every single day. On the weekends, up to the Buddhist Academy for Japanese, movies and other classes. And then at one point, discovered Japanese classical dance. There was one teacher in the United States and she was teaching in New York at the Japan Society, which had a building and its club on 57th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue, probably. And I went there, and I'd spoken to the teacher over the phone. I didn't own a kimono. She said, "Okay, I'll bring you one." And so I went there dressed in the kimono and started. In Japan, they don't teach you, how to dance. You just follow along,
Yeah.
that whole Japanese mentality. And eventually you catch on, and if you don't catch on this lifetime, well, maybe next lifetime. So anyway, I started in the class just following the dance, and she looked at me very strangely, and she said, "Are you sure you haven't done this before?" And I said, "No, and at the end of the class, I was looking at something with my back to the door, and a man came in, and he mistook me for a Japanese from the back until he saw my face. And then it was, maybe a year later, I was at the Boston Museum and saw a beautiful Japanese scroll, and I thought, I would like to choreograph that. There's a dance in here. And so maybe this was before I met the dance teacher. I got a picture of this scroll and was sort of making up the story of the dance and starting to choreograph it. And one day I told my the Japanese, the buyo, the kabuki dancing teacher, about this story that I had seen in this scroll and was choreographing, and she looked at me very, very strangely, and she said, "That's a very famous story in Japan." And I went, "Oh, no, I didn't know." And the funny thing is that not only is it a very famous story, and there's a kabuki dance to it and a no performance to it, that it happened on the not far from Okayama, actually, when I was in the monastery in Kobe. Once a week on Wednesdays, I had a job teaching at an elementary school in Suma, which was not a very long ride down from Kobe, but Suma was exactly the place along the river. Well, it was along the Sento Naikai, the inland sea. That was where this whole story and true story happened in Japanese culture. So I was going
Wait a minute,
back
what's
to...
the story?
The story is, it's called in Matsukame. It's the story of two sisters who were daughters of not a fisherman, but he was a salt drawer. They drew water from the sea and let it dry and sold the salt. That was their profession.
Yeah, we have that here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, in fact, that's where we buy our salt, from people who do that.
So this was, I forget his name. We could find it in history. One of the couriers at the emperor's palace had been playing around with women, too many women, or maybe one or two of the wrong women, and he was banished from the palace to this place on the inland sea. What was his name again? Well, we can find that out. And he took up with these two sisters and had a great ménage à trois.
Oh.
And after a while, I guess some of the women really wanted him to come back. I forget what year this was in the Japanese history. He was called back, and he told the two women, he said, don't worry, I'll be back. And of course, he never came back. So the story of the dance, of the kabuki dance and the no dance and the modern dance that I choreographed and performed was the longing of these women for this lover, that this what do you call men who just play around too much? I forgot. But anyway,
yeah,
that was the story, and that was the dance that they, they just pined away and finally died. He never came back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
But interestingly enough, when I went to Japan, because if China had been open to Americans, I might have gone to China. I just needed to go to one of those Asian countries, but China was closed, so it made my choice very easy. When I mentioned to my teacher that I wanted to go to Japan, and she said, "Oh, I'll give you a letter to my teacher." And I thought, sure, big deal.
Right.
And I didn't know how important letters were.
That's right.
And I had no idea that her teacher happened to be the emperor of Japanese classical dance, the emperor of Buyo. So I went there, padding along with my little letter, and because I had the letter, I was welcomed into this amazing culture of movie stars, geisha, dancers, all studying with this top classical Japanese dancing person. And I was really, really good at it. It was in my blood, you might say, or underneath my skin.
Where was this, and what year was it?
This was in Tokyo.
And what year?
1965 to Tokyo, and I started studying with Fujima Kanjuro, the top. All the kabuki stars studied with him. So, I met Toshiro Mifune and some of these greats on the things, and at first they thought that I was they probably thought I was an obnoxious. They thought I was a rich Western, and so the first week or so, month or so, they charged me a lot of money. But then when they realized that I wasn't, and I was really serious, and I was really good, they told me I didn't have to pay any more, and they started giving me kimonos and taking me to kabuki. It was really an amazing thing. But what happened was that I also saw a no performance. Did you ever see any of those when you were in Japan?
Yeah.
Well, I went, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. I love this. And I'm studying the wrong thing. So, of course, I couldn't just say, drop my kabuki classes, which were every day. The top guy, the emperor, Fujima Kanjuro, taught 1 week a month, and everybody came. But then I studied with his daughter, who was his heir. She was inheriting the name soon. So I studied with her every day. So I went every single day, which was very special and very wonderful. So I could not just cut them off. So I also studied no. And eventually I learned the dance for this Matsukaze, the story that I told you, in the kabuki style. And I also learned it in the no style. And in fact, I performed it.
Where?
In Japan. In Japan, not with all of the costumes. You do all the costume stuff, which costs a fortune, but there are also recitals where you don't do it in costume. You do it in just your regular kimono and hakama. And that's actually more difficult because the costumes can cover up a lot of irregularities. But if you're just in the simplicity of the kimono and the hakama, you better be good. But anyway, so I did that dance. From the no play, not the whole No play, just the dance.
Yeah.
Of that theme, that same theme. And then I also choreographed a modern dance with that same theme. And when I came back to San Francisco, there was a conference. It was held at the Miyako Hotel or somewhere in the Japanese Culture Center, and it was about Asian art. The guy had written a couple of books, was very famous, and in there I performed the No dance and the Kabuki dance, and I guess my modern dance too. Interesting.
Wow.
That's just when I came back in 1968. Where Japan Center was sort of just developing then, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, sort of destroyed Japantown, all the stuff that happened there, somewhat, quite a bit. I mean, the Japanese moved out. It was so cool and funky when I went there in '66, but it had to evolve. So now, while you were in Japan, you got involved with Zen. How did that happen?
Interesting, really interesting. I heard, and I don't even know how I heard, that there was a Greenwich Village kind of coffee shop somewhere in Shinjuku. And, in New York City, I lived in the Village. I loved the Village, and I thought, pooh, Greenwich Village, it couldn't be here. So anyway, one night I went to see the Greenwich Village coffee shop, and basically it was a coffee shop where the lights were very, very dim, and there was some big, ugly paintings on the wall. That was the Greenwich Village style.
Right.
And I was sitting there studying my No homework, actually, and there were two Caucasian men in a table not far away. One had a French accent, and one, I guess, was just an American accent. And I heard them say, this was at the end. No, it wasn't. I don't know when it was. Sometime during that first year, I heard one of them say, it happens to everyone. No matter how much they may be in love with the Japanese culture, when they get to know the Japanese, they really don't like them. And I almost choked on my coffee. I thought, oh, I think this has happened to me. And shortly after, the Frenchman who said that came over to me and said, pardon me, but are you Jewish?
My God.
Greenwich Village coffee shop, Shinjuku, and he's asking me if I'm Jewish?
Oh, that's funny.
And we talked, and he said he had been studying, he had been at a monastery, and he was studying now with the Zen master in Tokyo, Omori Sogen. Do you know that name, David?
Oh, yeah.
So he took me to meet Omori Sogen, who was just one of the nicest, most incredible people. The first time I was there, sitting in Omori Sogen's zendo, he got up with the keisaku, and his feet were gorgeous. The way they touched the ground and met the floor and went on. I spent my whole night just with my eyeballs going back and forth, following his feet. He was a lovely, lovely, lovely man.
What was his lineage?
Rinzai Lineage from Tenryuji. Oh, he was, he's the world's top kendo master.
Well, I certainly know the name, but I'm trying to place. He's very famous.
And he was he and his top student were the only two people in the country, in the world, who had the permission to fight a sword fight to the death. They never did, because they would kill one of them. But anyway, they were that great and that high. He had been one of the heads of one of the cells during World War II against the Americans, of course, against, he was a Japanese, And I remember asking him once, I said, well, was it, after the war? So he was this very, very accomplished, enlightened, you might say, kendo master. And after the war was when he entered the monastery. He went to Tenryuji in Kyoto, and there is where he and Yamada Mumon became very good friends. So, and I remember asking him, I said, well, after the war, you didn't do that much kendo anymore. Was it difficult for you? And he said, no, they took away all our swords. The Americans did. We couldn't do it anyway. So he went, and because of his accomplishment, his achievements in kendo, his achievements in Zen were pretty quick. So when after a year in Tokyo, and I knew, I was offered, I could have become the world's first foreign geisha.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, would I have been rich and famous. But when I really realized what the whole Japanese social system and how the men were and how the poor wives were waiting at home just keeping the rice warm so their drunken husbands could come home, I thought, no, I don't want to have anything to do with this.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't going to be set up in a tea house as a geisha or anything. And I knew that one of my intentions in coming to Japan was to study Buddhism as well as dance, and I'd certainly done dance pretty thickly, pretty strongly. So I wanted to go to a Zen monastery, and I had heard of what was his name? Ryo Takuji Nakagawa.
Soen Nakagawa.
Yeah. And I heard that he spoke some English. So I went to Omori Sogen, and I said, I'm leaving. I really want to go to a monastery to really understand this stuff better. And I think I hear Nakagawa Soen speaks some English, so I'm going there. And Omori Sogen said, why don't you go to see my friend at Shofukuji in Kobe? He speaks a little bit of English too. I'll give you a letter. And I thought, letter? So I said, okay. So he wrote me a letter, which was very, very important, because when I got to Shofukuji in Kobe on a September, October of 1966, I went to the door, rang the bell, whatever, and Mumon Roshi was away for the week, traveling, teaching, and if I hadn't had that letter, I would have been thrown out into the ditch. But since I had this letter, the head monk did not know what to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
So, long story short, he had to let me stay there. So I stayed there, and I sat for the week, and waited. And there was hey, do you remember Margaret Crawley from Zen Center?
Oh, very well.
Do you have any idea of her whereabouts or anything?
Yeah.
You do? Where is she?
In Boulder, but yeah, I want to get hold of her anyway. Let me see if what I have for her works. But I know other people that know her. I have a lot of ways to get to her.
Okay, so in Kobe, Shofukuji, 1966, the head monk, who did not know what in the world to do with this Caucasian woman, whose Japanese was so high class, because I was speaking geisha Japanese. When I asked for where the bathroom was, he couldn't even understand me, because, of course, men have a much different language. And I was so polite and so proper. There was one American man who had his own apartment, and he was sitting at Shofukuji, Richard Crawley, Margaret's brother.
I never met him, I don't think, but I used to hear about him from Margaret. And,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
I would like to I would like to have contact with her. I would like to find out. My guess is he's not alive any longer. But anyway, Ejo-san called Richard, and that...
So he was a student of Yamada Mumon?
Yes, he was.
Ah, I heard stuff like that, but it was sort of wasn't he in Mexico too, some? And
he lived in Mexico. He wasn't much for the U.S. He lived in Mexico. He had a wife in Mexico, and he came to Japan. And then when he left, he went back to Mexico. And that's how the Mexico, well, I'm jumping, but anyway, for jumping ahead, the head monk that time and Richard were very, very good friends. This was the one who didn't know what to do with me. So we spent a week, Richard and Ejo-san and me talking and everything. And after...
Ejo Takada?
Ejo Takada, yes.
Far out.
He was the head monk who couldn't throw me out.
Oh,
because
wow.
I had that letter from Omori Sogen.
Wow.
Miracles. So Richard and I became very close. And he put me up to a lot of trouble. Like he said, insist that they let you sit in the zendo, not just in the hondo. And when Mumon Roshi came back after the week, and just a week there, it showed me by that time I had, even in the U.S., I had read lots and lots and lots of D.T. Suzuki books.
Yeah.
Alan Watts was driving me nuts because I hated his, what I felt was superficial portrayal of Zen, and that's probably one of the instigators to get me going to the source.
Yeah.
But while I was up in Tokyo, one of the you'll appreciate this, how Japanese use Caucasians. One of the dancing teachers had always wanted to meet D.T. Suzuki. So she decided that I needed to meet D.T. Suzuki,
Yeah.
And I was her ticket. So we went down to Kamakura a couple of times and, had tea, met with Suzuki Sensei, and his heir, his companion and secretary and everything was a beautiful Japanese woman born in Los Angeles. Her born in Los Angeles, raised in New York, and her father was the gardener at the Brooklyn Japanese Garden, and her mother had a restaurant, a Japanese restaurant near Columbia University, where D.T. Suzuki would come and eat all the time.
Huh, and what was her name?
Her name was Mihoko Okamura.
Yeah.
She was about as troubled as I was, and Suzuki took her under his wing, and she became his companion. And so maybe the first day we were there, Suzuki looked at her, he looked at me. We had both been doing, buyo. We had her Japanese is gorgeous. He said, you and you're friends. So we became friends, and we're still friends. I see her when I go to Japan.
Goodness.
I call her on the telephone sometime. She's amazing. I'm 82. She's a little bit older. She's gorgeous, still gorgeous. And why am I telling you? Why did I tell you about that? Well, I guess that's an important part of it.
I like it.
Okay. But I was back down there with Ejo Takada, and and so Richard Crawley put me up to a lot of trouble. He said, I know. So after the week, Mumon Roshi came back.
Yeah, and you're sitting in the zendo.
Well, I think I was not sitting in the zendo. I was in the hondo all alone, cold. Nobody else was there. But Richard had a week to brainwash me, and he said, "You insist that you get to sit in the zendo." So my initial interview with Mumon Roshi, one of the things was, whenever a Japanese asked me what my religion was before I got there, and I would say Jewish, their response would always be, kashkoi, intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
This is their theme for what Jewish people must be. But when Maimon Roshi asked me what I did in Japan, in the U.S. before coming, I said, well, I had been a dancer, an aspiring dancer. And he looked at me and he smiled. He said, now you will learn the highest form of dance, movementless dance. And I thought, okay. And he was right. He was right. But I also asked him, I said, I'm here. I'm serious. I really, really want to study. No, what happened is after a week and I met him, I was so moved that I went back to Tokyo. I had been teaching dance classes to some people and taking the dance classes. Basically, I quit everything, packed up my few whatever, it was very, very little, and went back down to Kobe. And basically I said, here I am, and to Maimon Roshi. And he said, huh? I said, I'm here to study. I didn't even ask permission. I was driven. I just knew that I had to really understand this for real. And I had forgotten that I was Caucasian, that I was a woman, all those things. And basically he went, huh? And I said, yeah, I'm here. And he, in his great wisdom, he really gave me the chance. He was enlightened enough to see beyond that I was a woman and Caucasian, and that I really, really wanted to study. So I said, can I be one of your students? So yes. Can I sit in the Zendo? And he went, huh? I said, hey, I didn't say hey, but I said something like, our skin may be different, but underneath we're all the same. What's the difference between men and women? I'm going to do the same, zazen. Why can't I, can I sit in the Zendo? So he gave me permission to sit in the Zendo, which some of the monks were not too happy about.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But so there was in this Zendo, there were 30 monks, and this was this was like the Marine Corps, and so from the top of the Zendo, the head monk, the second monk, and then all in order on both sides. And then there was a lot of empty tatamis, and there I was way down at the bottom, right by the door, so that when it rained, I was the only one who got wet. When it snowed, I was the only one who got snowed on. And I had heard, by this time, stories of the two women who had been there before. One of them was the German woman who wore perfume and diamonds and everything. She sat in the Zendo too, and the monks hated her. And she went back to Germany and wrote a book called The Monks, the Master, and Me. And she made a fortune. I'm sure she's dead now. The other woman just recently died, was a Swiss woman. But I was determined to let them know that women were not wimps. So the room where the two head monks lived was outside at the foot of the Zendo. So when they were ready to come in for a sitting time, they would open the doors, and there I would be right there, and their heads would turn to the right, and then they would walk in way to the other end. It was a large Zendo, larger than at Sogenji, and put in the incense and start and everything. And I was really, really isolated, but I didn't care. I was there. That's what I was doing. But time after time, day and night, I never missed. Because I was the honor of all the women in the world to really, really make sure I was there. And time after time after time, they were sure I wasn't going to make it. One of the monks liked me. He had a crush on me, so he hit me harder. I mean, so hard my teeth rattled sometimes, and tears would get whopped out of my eyes. It was hard, And I would go into Mumon Roshi, and sometimes I would say, I would like to pay something I'm eating. Well, I didn't eat very much of the food. There's another story there. And he said, no, you don't have to. You're just you're doing the work. Just stay and sit. So he really supported me for the first, after the first Oseshin, he told me, I was just doing Sui Sokan, and he said, come back after the session. And after the session, I think I remember this because I read it on your website last night. He asked me, he said, well, Satori shimashita ka? And I said, that's not why I'm here. I don't want enlightenment. I just want to learn how to live better or be a better human or something like that, whatever it was I said. And so we had a great rapport. He was so kind and supportive. And good old Richard Crawley at one point, he said, okay, now it's time for you to ask to go begging with the monks, do takohatsu.
Oh, really?
And I went, huh? Yeah. And I said, they're not going to let me do that. He said, go and don't come back until you get permission. So I went. And I said, Mumon Roshi, can I go takohatsu? He said, of course not. And I said, he said, in the 300-year history of Zen or maybe it was longer, of Zen, and the 300-year history of this monastery, there has never been a woman to do takohatsu with the monks. And I said, hey, I'm sitting, I'm doing the same stuff, I'm sweating the same blood. Why not? What kind of discrimination and prejudice is this? And he looked at me and he said, okay, just wear your hat really low. And the funny thing is, I did go takohatsu with them, and the only people who knew that I was Caucasian were the little kids on their tricycles, because they were lower than me and they could see underneath the hat. But the adults, of course, didn't know.
That's funny.
But and then it was interesting how some people could handle me being there, and I kept my eyes down. I kept my hair up. Nobody knew I had long hair or anything. I just did my stuff. And Toyo no Hi, do you remember that?
The day of what? I forget.
The day of turning everything around, of turning all of the yin to yang, December 21st, where the rule of the day is to go against all the rules.
Oh, no, I don't know about that.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I have never seen, there were cases and cases and cases of sake rolled in. It was the day where, that was the rule, to go against all the rules. So there was a great big feast, and some other people from outside were invited. After the feast, which I helped cook with the monks, there was a show in the Zendo, and it was a parody. Anything went. They put Mumon Roshi in a baby stroller with a bib around his neck and a rattle, and parodied him. And I choreographed that modern dance for Matsukaze, the one that I had done. That was my contribution.
Yeah.
And after the show, the guests left, and the monks would drink. The tan was pretty high, and the floor underneath was concrete. They drank themselves amazingly drunk until they actually fell off the tan and cracked their heads. But the next morning, it was like nothing had ever happened, except you could tell as they were doing the chanting and the walking that they were balancing their heads very, very tenderly. They all had big hangovers. But the first year, I was there for 2 years of that. The first year, one of the guests, a priest from another monastery or temple, came over to me and he said, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. This is a zendo. This is for monks. You're a Caucasian and you're a woman. Get out of here. And the head monk came over and put his hand on his shoulder, and he said, you know what? She's all right. She can stay. Do you know, she sits with us, and you know, we even let her use our toilet. And so I knew I had been accepted finally. because the toilet, sometimes I had to walk past all of those men peeing to get to the one stall, and sometimes they were peeing and they would just turn their head and say something to me or something. So I was finally accepted.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
Now, Ejo Takada, about that time went to Mexico, to Mexico City, and then he was in Cuernavaca to start a zendo and got into working with peasants and developing soy products so they could have some self-support.
Yeah.
And
well, it started because Ejo was getting restless, getting bored. He wasn't going for Kensho or anything. He wasn't, he was just a easygoing monk, and Richard Crawley seduced him to Mexico. So Richard went to Mexico. Ejo went to Mexico, and when I left in '68, it was what prompted me to leave was because Momon Roshi was doing a pilgrimage, a tour with some people through Southeast Asia. And so, and I knew that after a year and a half, and he wanted me to shave my head, he wanted me to become ordained, he wanted me to do his translations, knowing that I'm lousy in words, I could never do good translations, but also knowing that if I became ordained and was a nun, I would have to go to a nunnery and I wouldn't have access to Momon Roshi. So I was smart enough not to do that, but so I knew it was either do that or leave. And I was getting, 29 by that time. I knew I wanted to have a family because I grew up in such a lousy family. I wanted to do better. And so it felt like it was time for me to leave. And so, let's see, Richard had left. Ejo was still there at his home temple. And when I was on the pilgrimage with Momon Roshi in India, how in the world did I get a letter from Richard saying, come, we're going to start a Zen Center in Mexico City. So rather than stopping along in some of the other places, I really wanted to go to Greece. I wanted to see the dervishes in Afghanistan. And when I was in London, Mihoko Okamura, Suzuki Sensei had died, and she was living with Bernard Leach down at his estate in Devon, and she wanted me to live there with her. But I said, nope, got to go to New York, got to go to Mexico. So I dropped a lot of things, went to Mexico City, and by that time, so Richard and I had a relationship, and by that time, he had found another woman, and he was off with her, and he said basically, you and Ejo-san can start the center. So I saw him once or twice in Mexico City, and I don't think I saw him after that at all. He was off with his new little chickie, and Ejo-san and I started the Zen sitting in Mexico City. It was a babysitting business for the psychoanalysts who had, that conference had been in Cuernavaca.
Eric Fromm was there.
Eric Fromm, yeah. Right. Charlotte Selver, Eric Fromm, Richard DiMartino, D.T. Suzuki. Mihoko-san just gave me some jewelry that she got in Mexico that time, interestingly enough. So
They put out a book called Zen and Psychoanalysis about it.
Right, exactly. And the psychoanalysts that were in Mexico City wanted to have a place to get rid of their clients, their patients. So on Monday nights, I think it was Monday nights, we would have a sitting group with these people who didn't know what to do. None of the psychiatrists came. They just wanted to send their people.
Right.
At one point, I recall it being in a bus. I don't recall. I think Ejo-san was living in that bus, and I was living with another couple, gringos who had an extra. Well, I was living with Richard Crowley's best friend, actually. But that started
in Mexico City.
In Mexico City, and I was there for 3 months. Every Monday night at least, we had this Zendo thing. And then after about 3 months, it was so clear that we were just babysitting these neurotic Mexicans, most of them men, maybe all of them men, I don't remember. And I said to Ejo-san, this is not working. This is not going to be a real Zendo thing. So I think you should go back to Japan, and I'll go back to the United States. And Ejo-san, who he didn't have to get up early in the morning anymore. He could do anything he wanted. He said, "No, I'm not going back." So he stayed, and that's when I took a bus up from Mexico up to San Francisco and landed in Zen Center.
Hey, wait a minute. I want to go back to Japan just real quick. So did you know Do-san there?
Yes. I'm older than Do-san, and he arrived about maybe sometime in my year and a half. We don't quite know.
He arrived when you were there?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm his senior.
Oh, far out. He's very loyal to you. We should explain, though, that this is Harada Roshi, Shodo Harada Roshi. But people who studied with him back there, and he was their fellow student, called him Do-san. And what about...
that was his name.
Well, that explains to me why you were so important to him. Because I'd see him when he came to Marin, and, I'd be talking to Chi-san about when to see him when I can, and it would be, well, he's got to see Judyth at this time. And I always noticed that, he respected you like a senior, a senpai. What about Chi-san, Priscilla Starrant?
Priscilla had not arrived yet.
Oh, is that right? God, she's been there forever now.
Yeah, it seems like it. Maybe she was in Japan, but I don't think so. I left in 1968. I'm not quite sure. We could find that out easily. I bet you know that. You have that in your records. Because she was not there yet. Do-san was just a young monk. We talked about that recently. I'm older than him in age. I'm also a senior to him in that respect. Interesting, because 10 years later, when I first brought my children to Japan, Do-san was the head monk.
Oh.
And we played with him. My kids played with him, so they know him from there. That was long before. Yeah. He was still a monk.
Are you still there?
I first met Priscilla.
Hey, hang on.
She had been up the mountain doing pottery, and came. Yeah.
I'm getting a call. Hang on. I can't get rid of it. Just a second. Are you still there?
I am. I'm so
good.
Impressed. What language is that?
The people coming to fix the Wi-Fi. And
Ah.
I said, feel free to come, hit the bell. The housekeeper will take care of you. I said, I'm doing an interview. I'm upstairs, and I'm going to keep doing it. The housekeeper can tell you what to do. So that's all.
Where's your wife?
She's probably down there too, but you know, probably the people that come won't speak Indonesian. I mean, won't speak English. So Katrinka won't want to deal with. Well, she can. I mean, she can speak a little.
So the language is Indonesian?
Yeah.
Is that the language?
Yeah.
Is it like anything else?
Yeah, Malaysian. I can talk to people in Malaysian. And it's very close. It's got some Arabic and some Sanskrit. It's an easy language. It's a trade language.
Wow, sounded nice.
Yeah, it's a nice language, and they're very nice to deal with. I love dealing with them. I like being here.
I loved Bali. I
Yeah.
was there 30 years ago.
Whoa, you were here 30 years ago. Let's see. I was here in 92, so you were here in 91.
Probably 89 or 90, somewhere around there, yeah. And I loved it. It's one of the few places I would go back to.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't recognize it. It's gotten quite overgrown, full of traffic jams, and not now.
Yeah,
now
that's what you said, and I thought, oh dear, oh no.
But
oh well.
There's good places here, and the people are nice, and we live in a sort of quiet area. But yeah, I didn't recognize Ubud when I came back. It was just unrecognizable, really, literally.
That's what I heard you say on the water moon thing, and I went, oh no, because that's where we stayed. We went around the island. My daughter was doing scuba diving. Anyway.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, I liked Ubud, and and went to a lot of the dance performances and things.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
They were developed by Westerners, incidentally.
What?
The dances here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they took the native dance and made it something.
Oh dear.
They took it on tours of Europe back in the 30s.
Oh.
Like
back in the
European 30s? Choreographers greatly influenced how it was done, so that it was a real show.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That's all right.
That's what they do.
They're cool.
Well,
I only see them when there's guests here.
Yeah. Well, if they destroy the basic culture, that's a shame. But
well, they don't do that. It still goes on. The original stuff still goes on in villages.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Bali's a little like Japan in that no matter how much it gets corrupted by Western influence, it still holds to a lot of its original culture and basic values, and they're both shamanistic cultures. I mean, you got Hinduism here, but what they're really into is spirits, and that's what Japanese are into too. Is what I observe.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And I like that. I like that because it grounds people into the immediate. It's not up in the sky somewhere far off, which shouldn't be Buddhism or Hinduism either, or Christianity. But when people are making offerings to spirits that are right around them all the time, it sort of grounds them in the immediate in a way. They have constant offerings. So hey, wait a minute. All right. So where were we? So
we were saying that Priscilla, who had not arrived.
Yeah.
I don't know if she was up in the mountains doing pottery. I don't know when she got to Japan, but when I was back, wow. So I came back in 68.
And you'd arrived at Zen Center. So I want to
I
hear
arrived
about
at Zen
that. I
Center.
want to hear about that.
Yeah. But let me just
I
say,
met
I
you.
didn't.
I met you as
Huh?
soon as you arrived. I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, you were there the whole time. The first, I mean, like I said, Momon Roshi told me to go to find Miura in New York, and he did a classical, no thank you, I'm not teaching thing. So, and I didn't want to stay in New York anyway. I wanted to go back to San Francisco. So I did.
Wait a minute. You asked him 3 times.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, that's what you do. That's what you do. That's what we Japanese do, right? So I figured, okay, I'm off the hook. That's it. So, and I remember going up and to the office in Zen Center, the office where Yvonne was.
Yeah.
And we spoke for a bit. I had been a secretary, so I offered to help her. And she asked, John Steiner was hanging around, so he's the one that took me across the street to meet with Suzuki Roshi.
Ah.
That first time. And John and I guess it was before I met Suzuki Roshi or after, but we stood on the steps of Sokoji for over an hour and just talked. I mean, here were 2 Jewish people, or Buish, as you might say, and there was a lot to talk about. So I remember that very much. And Suzuki Roshi really, and I just hit it off because, first of all, he wasn't my teacher. I didn't need one. I had one, but he liked the fact that I did the same tea ceremony, the same school as Oksan had done.
Oh, you did Omote Senke?
Omote Senke, yes. And then on the, like I said when you were talking at Water Moon, boy, that place was cold, that big cavernous old synagogue place, and how we sat around. But I remember working in the kitchen during a sesshin, I guess, and I was, I wore my kimono and hakama, and I do that thing with the himo where it crosses in the back and it holds back your sleeves.
Yeah, the wrap you put around it.
Yeah, there's a name for it, which I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Suzuki Roshi walked by and snapped it. It's not an obi. It was just one of the many himos that you needed to hold the whole thing up. But he said something, and actually, I think it's in your whatever you call it of me, because I read it last night. He said something like, "This is the Zen mind at work," or something like that. He liked that, the practicality of it, so that my sleeves didn't get dirty. And we would have tea, and we would joke, and we would laugh. He liked the fact that I had done the dancing and, done a lot of the cultures.
Did you speak any Japanese with him?
Yeah,
I'm sure he liked that, too.
Yeah. And he always would call in Oksan to visit with me, too. Yeah, he was really so nice. And I was, that was 68, 69.
I was living in Tassajara, but I'd see you when I came into this city.
And I went up to Tassajara. That first time was in 68. Later, just before were you up at Tassajara when Lama Govinda came?
Yeah.
I was up there beforehand. But anyway, what was it? Tassajara a couple times, or more than a couple of times. I really wanted to live at Tassajara, but there was, I wasn't greeted with open arms because Zen Center had its own hierarchy, and I was a renegade.
Yeah.
I had come from, Rinzai, not even Soto. And I do remember standing there and chanting the Hanya Shingyo so slow I thought I would faint.
Yeah.
Whereas at Shofukuji, those monks did it in one breath. So I had a lot of changes to make, to adjust. And it's so funny. So, boy, I lived in, 2018 or something, the numbers of those houses?
It was the 1800 block. Shokoji was 1881.
And Reb had the front room in this flat. It was the lower flat that we were in, and I was in the second room. And Reb moved. I remember him arriving in the hearse. Do you remember that? He drove a hearse from Milwaukee or someplace, and that's how he arrived.
From Minneapolis.
Yeah, it started with M. Yeah, and then at one point he was moving. Maybe he was moving down to Tassajara, and I got the front room. But I remember. So back up a little bit in Japan. One of the people I would visit with on the days off in Kyoto, was Ruth Fuller Sasaki, the one who wrote. Yeah. And she started the first Zen Institute of Zen in America.
No. She didn't start it. She came out of it.
No. She founded it.
Well.
She and her husband.
Well, yeah, he was the founder, but did she found it with him?
She may have founded it after him. Richard reminded...
No, it goes way back.
The first Zen Institute of America in Japan?
You're talking about in Japan.
Yeah, in Japan.
Yeah, you mean at Daitokuji?
Yes.
Oh, right, she founded that.
Yeah, what were you thinking of?
The one in New York City.
What in New York City?
The first Zen Institute of America. It goes back to the 30s.
Oh, well, what, did her husband start that?
Yeah.
So he was long dead, and she did this.
Yeah,
nice
so he's Sokeon. And here, I'll tell you. It was established in 1930 as the Buddhist Society of America. After World War II, it became the first Zen Institute of America.
So, okay, but this was in Japan, and I would go to, visit with her for the afternoon and have a cup of tea or something. Actually, I went to her funeral. Do you know that she was Alan Watts' mother-in-law?
Oh, yeah, I forgot that, but that's right, yeah.
Well, Alan told me that. I wasn't aware of that. But anyway, one day we were sitting, and she said, "Well, my dear, what did you do in the United States?" And I said, well as being an aspiring dancer, I used to be a legal secretary, but I don't have to do that anymore, thinking, hey, now that I've been in a monastery, I can do better. And she said, why not? And it was like a light bulb that just flashed into my forehead, and I thought, oh, she's right. It's not that because I've been here at a monastery and I'm working on these koans and all this stuff that I don't ever have to be a secretary again. But what it really is that now that I have been in this monastery and am working on these koans and doing so much zazen, if I ever have to be a secretary, I can be a better one. So that was one of those nice flashes in my life. And I remember sitting in the room at Zen Center on Bush Street, and I hated being a secretary. I am not a good typist. I just, Anyway, somebody opened the door. Well, I have to tell you of one more before I tell you what happened through the open door. One day I was sitting with Momon Roshi, and his attendant, came to the door and bowed and basically said, the women's Rotary Club of such and such want to know if you can come and give them a talk on such and such a day. And I said to him, I said, Roshi-sama, you are so busy. They're not really interested in Zen. You don't have to go there. And Momon Roshi went into his sleeve, took out his little appointment book, opened it up, and said, oh, yes, I'm free that day. Okay. And boy, did I learn a lot about non-judgmental there.
Mm-hmm.
So those two instances, at Zen Center, the door opens and somebody says to me, can you type? And I said, yes. And he said, do you want a job typing for a week? And all of that, those two things, flashed through me. And I said, okay. And what the job was I typed the first newsletter for Esalen Institute that had opened up an office on Union Street in San Francisco.
Right, they had a San Francisco branch for a while. Oh, far out.
Right. Well, I was the typist, the secretary there. They liked me that week. They asked me to stay on. I stayed on. I eventually met the man who I married, who was the director of Esalen, and that's how that whole chapter
Director
started.
of Esalen in San Francisco?
Big Sur. No, in Big Sur.
What was his name?
Ben Weaver.
Oh, yeah, right. Far out. I forgot. All right. Of course. What was your name when I first met you?
Ofsowitz.
Oh, right.
Which is one reason why I got married, just to change my name.
Oh, yeah. That's great. That's great. That's what, when I married Elin Schweikart, she was on the phone with her father. We got married in Japan, and she said, no, I did not keep it. I hate that name. She was so happy to be Elin Chadwick.
So, does she still have Chadwick?
No, she's Elin Powers now.
Mm. Married again?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, I said, by the time we got married, since he was married and needed to get a divorce and all of that, I was already pregnant, and I didn't really need to get married, but I said I did it because I wanted to change my name. I like the name Weaver. But Suzuki Roshi was supposed to come down to Big Sur and do our wedding, but he was not well by then. And so we did our own impromptu wedding, and then the next week, I guess this was May of 1970, we drove up, and Katagiri Roshi did the wedding ceremony in Zen Center.
I think Suzuki had a flu then or something, but it wasn't a terrible year for him. I'm surprised, 1970. Just you got him at a bad time. But Katagiri did it, so that's all right. That's good.
Yeah, sure. That was very nice. Yeah. But I'm trying to think back to, I was already living in San Geronimo when Priscilla, who had been in Japan, had found Mumon Roshi after so many people told her that she couldn't do pottery and Zen. And when she was coming back to the States, I guess for a visit, or I don't know exactly how long, he told her to find me, to visit me. So one of her friends, Elia, you probably know Elia. Elia, who lived in Bolinas, still lives in Bolinas. Anyway, Elia brought Priscilla, who still had long hair, to visit me. I think they spent the night at my house in San Geronimo. That's the first time I met her.
Ah. Ah.
Yeah. So funny, I'm her senpai also.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah. Well, and so you were around Zen Center for how long? A year, 2 years, or?
Mm.
I mean,
Um,
I remember you just through the years,
yeah,
because you were
yeah.
living around there. So I don't know when. I lived in Bolinas a lot, and I'd be
Did you?
with Zen Center and in
Mm-hmm.
Bolinas, and then in
Mm-hmm.
Mirror Beach and Zen Center. Um,
Mm.
so
Well,
I didn't know. I remember you living in San Rafael,
no, San Geronimo.
San Geronimo.
My daughter Tara was conceived on the floor at Zen Center on Bush Street,
Uh huh.
March 17th of 1970,
Uh huh.
and then so I lived. I guess I still had my room at Zen Center, but I lived a lot down in Big Sur with Ben. And
You had a son.
no, well, first I had her daughter.
Yeah. All right.
Then, then, um, then when then let's see, we went up to, well, Ben Weaver's brother uh, saw Esalen and decided he could do something like that in Canada, which he did, and called it Cold Mountain Institute. And we went up there actually to immigrate to Canada because I was pregnant and I was sure I was having a boy, and I don't believe in wars, and so I wanted to be out of the country. It turned out we went up there, we got a place and everything, and then we came back to California to pack up and move up there, and my husband injured his back, so we ended up having to stay in California, and my daughter was born in Carmel Community Hospital. And then
Huh.
5 weeks we drove up to Canada, and our last stop on the way up was visiting John Steiner, who was still living in that area, and Nils, both.
John Steiner was living in the Northwest.
No, he was living in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so you
Yeah,
visited John and because Nils moved to Port Townsend,
yeah,
with
eventually, yes.
Silas and all of
Right,
them. And
right.
you and Silas were close too. I remember
We
that.
were. Yes, we were, and we talked about growing old together. Oh, he lived in Forest Knolls, and I lived in San Geronimo,
Right,
so we lived
right.
physically close as well as mentally close. But then that other woman, captured him up and took him up to Port Townsend. Do you have contact with him?
Yeah, I talked to him maybe about 8 months ago.
Uh-huh.
He's got Alzheimer's.
Oh no, does he?
Yeah, so he remembered me and everything, but he was confused about some things. But we had a good long talk. We talked for an hour, and I'm going to call him back again. But he's
Hmm.
I'm close with Bill Porter, the writer Redbine,
Uh-huh.
and I keep up with how Silas is doing through Bill.
Uh-huh.
And I went up there many times and visited with Silas and Nils and various
Yeah.
people up there. Um,
Mhm.
mm,
So,
mm.
but the woman he was with, is she still there, alive, or is he alone?
Well, was he brought? Let's see now, Silas and oh God, I have to look.
I forgot her
I
name.
know her. Uh, wait a minute. Beverly.
Beverly.
Yeah. I don't know if that's who took him up there, but he
Yeah.
is.
Well, whoever it was, she knew she couldn't afford a house down in Marin, so she moved up there and got a house and
Yeah.
I would say seduced him up there, which was very good. And then Nils was already up there.
Oh, is that right? Is that right?
Yeah, he
So
he
Silas
was.
came up after Nils.
I think so. That's how I see it.
Uh-huh.
I could be wrong. My daughter thinks she has seen Silas when she's been up there house sitting for her friends, but that's been a couple of years.
Yeah, well, he was around. He still gets around some.
What about Amber? Do you know?
Yeah, she's in
His
Marin.
daughter?
She's in Marin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
she had a baby.
Yeah, but Kelly, my son Kelly, talked to Amber recently. I've had some contact with Amber, and Kathy, and Kathy's sort of fading away now too. Although I had quite a bit of contact with her through the years. Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
do you remember Dennis?
Which Dennis? Dennis White. No.
Dennis Anderson.
Dennis Anderson. Yeah, he was up there. He was up there.
He changed his name to Cloud.
Oh, right. That's right. I forgot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did book signings in Port Townsend, like 3 different book signings. And one book signing, there were 7 people there who'd been Suzuki Roshi students. Or had been through,
Great.
you know. Yeah, something. And then, you know, after Zen Center, you got into the sensory awareness and the Tai Chi and...
Well, that wasn't after Zen Center. I got into sensory awareness while I was at Zen Center, and actually the Tai Chi also, because I was Chen Manqing, the Grand Master in New York. I told him I didn't want to stay in New York to study, so he told me who to contact in San Francisco, which I did, and the guy said, well, make me some classes and I'll teach. And so I got a lot of Zen Center people to be in his first classes.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's great. That's great. Well, yeah. And you're still going strong. That's terrific. And I hope... Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm going as strong as I used to, but I'm still standing, knock wood.
Yeah. Well, you know, if it wasn't for the COVID-19, you'd have been up in Canada doing all those workshops.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Happily.
Well, look, we've talked quite some time. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we go our separate ways?
You know, we've mentioned so many people. It's interesting. I just want to mention another name involved in the Zen Center community, because we haven't. When we've mentioned Katagiri Roshi, I just want to mention to honor Koben Chino.
Right. Good for you. Yeah. So, what was your relationship with him?
Well, he was just a lovely person. I knew, what was her name? Harriet, right?
Yeah.
Harriet. I think we were living in the same flat on Bush Street. And when she aimed, when she became attracted to him, and all of that. But I remember him, and he would tell me that yes, he was a Soto monk, priest, but he used to sneak away from, what was the name of the university that Soto people went to?
Komazawa.
Komazawa. He would sneak away whenever Mumon Roshi was giving a talk. He would, in the area, he would sneak out to go and listen to Mumon Roshi. So we had that connection.
Oh, that
he was also at Naropa.
Oh, yeah.
Just the first year.
Yeah.
So, there was Trungpa, and then I started the Tai Chi program at Naropa, which is still going. But we had some good, pleasant times talking and things.
Oh.
Oh, and right here in my room, I have a lot of, calligraphy shikishis from Mumon Roshi, and they're so easy to travel with, so I had some to put up in my, funky college room at Naropa, and Kobun had told one of his students to weave some backings for me. So the two backings I have on either side of the fireplace, which frame two shikishis from Yamada Mumon, were gifted to me by Kobun Chino.
Oh, that's nice.
Wow, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I just wanted to honor him. So many names, so many memories.
Wow. Yeah. And you've really, you have created a tapestry there, going from New York and dance in Japan and Zen in Japan and Mexico and sensory awareness and Tai Chi.
Yeah. I can tell you just one more thing. When I really got involved with Charlotte and Charles, I wrote to Mumon Roshi. We corresponded, and I said maybe this wasn't writing. Anyway, I told him maybe it was when he came to Mexico, because he came once to visit Ejo-san. Yeah, I have a picture of him riding a burro. Anyway, and I took my daughter, who was about 2, so this was 1972. Mumon Roshi went to Mexico to check out Ejo-san, and I told him about sensory awareness and how it was just like Zazen. And so I don't have to do any more sitting, any more Zazen. And he looked at me and he said, "Yes, and you still do have to do Zazen." So that was that.
Good for him. He came to Green Gulch that year.
He did. I was there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah, that was on his way to Mexico, I think.
Oh, yeah. Richard Baker was very enamored with him, and
yes, he was.
And really looked up to him in Japan, and and the way that Dick related to him at Green Gulch was uncustomarily humble. You know what I mean?
As well, he should have been. I was there.
Yeah.
I don't see much humility in Richard Baker, but yeah, we had some tussling because Mumon. Let's see. First, he was up in Mount Baldy seeing Sasaki. So then he was flying into San Francisco, and we were. So I was living in Big Sur. And Richard was supposed to give me a call as soon as he knew what plane he was coming up on. And he never did. But luckily, the plane was delayed, so somebody called us and said, his plane's delayed, he won't be there until whatever. And so my husband and I, with my infant daughter, jumped into the car and drove up from Big Sur and just made it.
Yeah, well, I could have told you don't rely on Dick to get that call.
Yeah.
That was a mistake.
Yeah, well, I really, yeah. Well, anyway, we got there to the airport, and I called him out on it. Dan Welsh was there that day. He was accompanying Dick.
Oh, yeah.
Baker. Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's in Santa Fe.
Good. Nice.
Yeah.
I think of his sister, Jeannie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking at a picture of her yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah. At her.
Lots of history.
Yeah. Yeah, at her Potrero Hill.
Yeah.
What was it? A weaving studio?
Yeah. It was sewing. She was the first company to do the zafus and stuff. Yes.
Oh, right. She was the first person to do that, wasn't she?
Yes.
Or one of the first. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Ayaya or Alaya or something
Alaya?
like
Did
that.
she start Alaya? Did she
I
call
think
it
she
Alaya?
did. I think so.
Far out. In fact, I used to visit her there. I went to visit her there the day she died. The day she killed herself.
Really?
In fact, I went to visit her there both times she tried to kill herself. I don't know, I was sort of drawn to her or something when it happened.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. There's actually more to that, but I'm not going to get into it.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, she and I weren't lovers, but we were friends, and I'd visit her. And yeah, I was really sorry.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, that's a lot of remembering.
Yeah, indeed. So, well, I hope to see you again sometime. I don't know if I'll ever get back to America. I'm not. I mean, the only thing that wants me to go back is to see friends, but I'd rather they came here. So why don't you come back here and visit?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'll be coming back as much as I would like to, but if I ever do, I'll look for you.
Right.
Try to find you.
Well, family too. So, going back to see family, but family comes here. So.
Nice. You've done it well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's big, and everybody has guns, and they're all crazy.
Yeah.
That's the way it seems from afar.
It ain't fun here. It ain't fun, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, David.
Yeah. Well, wonderful talking with you, Judyth. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, nice talking with you, too. Okay. Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Take care.
Take good care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So, thank you very much, Judyth. That was great. Really enjoyed talking with you, and I learned a lot. Yeah, that was interesting. Learned a little more about some things that, sort of fill in some of the blanks there. But of course, it's all disappearing from my memory as fast as I learn new things. And that's fine. I got an email from her saying, oh, darn, I forgot to mention the 25 years I've worked with the Tibetan nuns in Dharamsala. Oh, well. All right, Judyth, next time. So, and I have a report on the Wi-Fi. People here call it Wi-Fi. We'd had I didn't think of this. Katrinka had, but I hadn't. But we'd had a lot of wind the day it went out. And, it broke a line or whatever in a tree around here. And it was just our line coming from the street. So they had no other outage, so they had to find it. So they were in the house and out there and they found it. Now, in the process, I've lost my Wi-Fi upstairs, but we're going to get that fixed right away. I've called them, but I've also called Untu, my tech guy, because he could tell me exactly what's wrong. I probably can get it going again. So, until next time, this is DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Dogget Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.